Hello, hello! I'm Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through writing metaphors. Season 4 has begun! I'm starting this off with the topic of being positive and supporting other writers. The week I drafted the script, I was on a tough run. The late summer weather seemed to be cooling off, and then I was hit by a scorcher on my long run. As I was struggling up the last hill before I was about to turn around, I was slowing down to a crawl. For those of you who follow me on social media, that was the run where I bit it and tripped. I rolled with style, or as much as a man in his 30s can gracefully roll across concrete. By the time I got to that hill and the turnaround point, my palm was bleeding, and I had a sizable welt growing on my hip. Long story short, that run sucked. While I felt like crap, somebody running the opposite direction was cheering me on. He shouted words of encouragement to every other runner struggling to get to the top of the hill he was casually running down. It was a split-second moment and one which passed me by without realizing what had happened. Sure enough, that stranger helped me speed up and force more out of my legs. Not only was I faster, but I felt lighter on my feet. Don't get me wrong, that afternoon hurt a lot, and I should have taken better care of my body from when I fell. I didn't, and I paid for it. Nevertheless, that stranger cheering me on improved my outlook, which improved my run. What does this have to do with writing, though? During this past week, I read an excerpt from a writer's upcoming novel. I enjoyed what I read and told the author as much about what I perceived to be within their story. While they were encouraged by my compliments, they were also disheartened because one of the things that I perceived in the story triggered some new inspiration that led the author to realize they might need to do some drastic rewrites. That led them down a path of self-doubt when all I wanted to do was give positive feedback for a great opening chapter. Needless to say, I felt awful because my words had the exact opposite effect of what I hoped for. We talked it out and eventually they worked through the issues. All along, I kept stressing how much I liked their writing and the opening chapter. The good news is that they were able to change a major attribute of the antagonist with minimal changes to the story. Here are 7 tips to help other writers as they climb their own hills, metaphorical or otherwise. Number 1, cheer. Sometimes shouting, "You can do it," or "Get off your butt and write," actually works. The smallest amount of motivation can get us to put down a video game controller or a vacuum cleaner or the dishes or whatever chore we're using as a means of procrastination so we can write and meet our word count goals. I've shifted my TBR list to focus more on indie books, and when I finish a novel that somebody I know has written, I make sure to reach out to them and tell them how amazing the story was. Trust me, those tiny little moments of cheer mean so much to us. Number 2, listen. Listen to what the other person is saying. Listening, truly listening, is a skill. Don't do what I do when I read my own writing. I frequently read what I think is there or what I intended to be on the page, instead of what's actually written. Listen without preconceived notions and hear what the person is saying. That way we can give good recommendations, or if nothing else, hear them put words to the problems they're facing. Number 3, don't only be positive. This may seem counterintuitive, but only giving compliments rings false. If I only heard great things about my novel, I would know that the person I'm talking to is not being honest with me. Or that they're my grandmother, who to this day insists to my wife that I am perfect and flawless. Despite everyone at the table laughing at that one for, I don't know, some reason. No story is perfect. As much as it hurts, I want to know what those flaws are so I can fix them and not make the same mistakes in the future. Telling me everything works and is amazing when it's not and it can't be isn't helpful. What I'm saying is be genuine. Number 4, don't tear it to shreds. Much like being overly positive is unhelpful, drawing a giant red X through every page is disheartening. Writers shouldn't rewrite their novel from the ground up. When I did do that every 6 months for a few years, I knew that I was holding back both my writing skills and the number of works I would get published. Back to harsh criticism. Let's say that you are reading the worst piece of fiction ever written. In other words, it's the equivalent of the worst movie ever made, The Room, for manuscripts. Unless the story is a cash grab, the author cares about what they created. Telling them that their work belongs in the trash comes off as bullying and spiteful for the sake of tearing down their dreams. Instead, do your best to work with them to improve certain aspects. It may not become a bestseller, but the worst issues I've ever come across in a story could be addressed, handled, resolved with a handful of minor tweaks. Plus, I can only give one person's opinion, and despite what my grandmother says, I'm frequently wrong. A book I think of as a travesty could be an emotionally resonant masterpiece for someone else. Yes, I've come across this exact scenario where a book I thought of as trash, filled with plot holes and unlikable characters, was critically acclaimed by countless people for being life-changing. In short, there is no reason to tear down somebody's work because we can only offer one person's opinion, and someone else will see things entirely differently. Number 5, the 2-to-1 rule. So as not to tear someone down, I try to give a ratio of 2-to-1. For every harsh criticism or plot hole I identify, I try to come up with 2 positives. Whether that is a beautifully crafted scene or the moment between 2 heroes that I was thrilled took place after chapters of build-up, I highlight what I liked. Finding 2 things that worked for every perceived flaw is a great way to balance the good with the bad. Number 6, give suggested fixes. You know what makes bad news much better to hear? When there's already a solution to the problem. Sure, the hero is a monster, but what if they save a cat in the first chapter or don't dismember the person they're torturing for information? While I've done a video on the manipulative nature of the save the cat method, it is a way to endear readers towards otherwise morally great characters. It takes more than that, but it is a head start. In Falling Through, I wrote a character people did not like. I asked each of my beta readers to mark the point at which the character did something that they absolutely hated. The beta readers who provided actual solutions to the problems they identified made the revision process much easier, to the point where I was able to bring that character to a tolerable level for most readers. Spoiler alert, Tracy is one of the most divisive characters and plot movers within my story. Some people love her, some people hate her, and the reasons why have been quite surprising. And lastly, number 7, establish expectations. One of my biggest issues early on was that I didn't know how to ask for help. Because of that, I had a reader give mostly grammar fixes when I needed to address the fundamental flaws in the story. That grammar read-through was largely a waste of time as I had to rewrite the entire story so I could close the plot holes and give the characters proper motivation. By figuring out boundaries and goals, that reader is now someone I rely on to improve my writing. I'll frequently send them a chapter or a paragraph and ask specific questions like, how's the pacing, or does this dialogue work? Having those expectations explicitly defined gives a focus to make reading more efficient. As an honorable mention, don't make it personal. If someone is working with us to improve our writing skills or our story, don't chew their head off. Volunteer beta readers are donating their free time, and it's because they want to help other writers. Oh, and don't take ghosting by beta readers or critique partners personally. I think every writer I know has at least one, if not dozens of ghosting experiences after sending out manuscripts. I know I do. It sucks and it hurts, but it's a part of putting our passions out there to potentially be walked all over. All in all, let's keep making this the wonderful writing community that I care so much about. I'm always fascinated to have conversations with such talented writers and discovering about some of their additional talents outside the written word. So this is me cheering us all on. Get out there and write those words. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. I'm going to switch it up today. Please post in the comments your favorite thing about the writing community. I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Running to Write. So if you're interested in my running progress or want reminders of when I post videos, please feel free to follow me. Sign up for my Running to Write monthly newsletter for all things running and writing related. There's also an indie author section for the books I've read and pictures of my dog because Rufus is a good boy. The link is in the description below. See you next time. Until then, cheer on another writer.